Hello, my name is William Watts. I'm the director of Restore Labs, and today we're going to talk to you about treating the aging disease and how focusing on health span can help you prevent the accumulation of damage that comes with aging. So I want to start this presentation out with a quick question. What would you do with 10 more good years? How would you spend 10 more good years on the things that you love to do, whatever they are? So now I want you to imagine a world where aging is optional. Rather, a world where we can measure what happens when we age, aka the damage that comes as we get older. We can manage that damage and maybe even prevent it. That would allow us to feel better for longer and do more of the things that we love to do. And that's a really exciting place to be. And I think that's where we are right now. Over the past 120 years, we've been focusing on extending life. That's been very, very valuable. At the beginning of the 20th century, the average life expectancy of Americans was about 49 years of age. Now it's closer to 79 years of age. That represents a 61% change in the average life expectancy of Americans. The problem is that while we are focused on extending life, we weren't focused on extending the healthy years we've had. What we're left with right now is there's about a 16-year gap between our health span and our lifespan. That means that there's 16 years of life where we're suffering from a debilitating condition, a chronic disease, a problem that prevents us from doing the things that we love to do. And that's where companies like Restore comes in. We're focusing on making health span focused solutions more available for customers so that they can extend those years and bring those years as close as possible. I'd like to introduce you to one of our customers. Her name is Barbara, and she suffers from rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis does not have a cure in that you cannot make it go away, but you can adopt solutions that make the symptoms basically non-existent so that they don't run your life. Rheumatoid arthritis is characterized by serious fatigue and joint pain, but if you focus on health span and proactive health and wellness solutions, you can make the symptoms go away. Obviously, that includes focusing on diet, but sometimes that might mean using a sauna more, cryotherapy, ice bath, things of that nature to reduce the joint pain and improve fatigue. That's some of the things that Barbara's doing. Before she came to Restore and before she started adopting health span focused solutions, she was not able to live the life that she's able to live now. She is a martial artist. She's a business owner. She's a mother, but her symptoms were ruling her life. We don't want that to be a reality for anyone. I'd like to talk a little bit about where the market is right now. There's been a shift to wellness and prevention and proactive healthcare away from the reactive nature of the contemporary health system. This was true before the pandemic, and it's even more true now. You got to focus on the proper diet. You got to bring in saunas. You got to do right cold exposure. There's a lot of things that you can do to improve your immune system and how you respond to stressors. And that is really where the market is moving right now so that they don't come down with those negative chronic diseases that really run your life. There's been massive technology advancements in the past 120 years. I like to think about 23andMe. For a few $100s, you can understand your genetic code, right? That was completely inaccessible 100 years ago. And when we first sequenced the genome, it cost more than the entire value of this company. So no one was getting it. But now I could get it as a Christmas present. I could give it to someone, and we can use that information to understand our health on a cellular level and make meaningful changes to avoid problems that come with aging and extend our health span. This is pushing us into what we call the age of agelessness. What's happening is people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are focusing on health span to the point of them functioning younger than they should, or what we think they should. And that means that people younger than them see that and they're like, okay, well, if they're able to restore tissue function and live a meaningful, vibrant, active life that we might have thought was impossible, if I start focusing on that younger, I'll never get to the point of needing to restore function of my tissues. I will have a health span extended to the point of me living a vibrant life for potentially my whole life. And that's what we like to call the age of agelessness. I'd like to focus on the graph we have on this slide. The health metric score is on the y-axis, your age is on the x-axis. What we see is that you're born, you have a health metric score of 10 out of 10, but if you aren't focusing on your health span, it drops off really rapidly. Right at about 29, the likelihood that we get a chronic disease and our health span is diminished increases significantly. However, if we are focusing on our health span, that age is extended out till about 40, and the drop off on that curve is actually much slower. So what that means is the sooner we focus on our health span and adopt proactive health and wellness solutions, the later in life we come down with these chronic diseases, and the less likely we are to come down with those chronic diseases. So the major killers in the world today: heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, these are now considered symptoms of aging, right? The damage that we accumulate throughout our life makes it more likely that we will come down with these diseases and that we will suffer from them. Conversely, if we're focusing on our health span, the likelihood of us coming down with those diseases diminishes, and potentially we can avoid them. So I'd like to look at this infographic real quick just to talk about how we think about aging, right? Everyone starts healthy and well. They age, they get older. As the years go by, they accumulate inflammation, their health span is at risk. Eventually, they come down with what we refer to as inflammaging, which is your inflammation is at a point that it is driving the aging process, and it makes you more likely to come down with specific chronic diseases. That contributes to accelerated aging, and over time, it continues to increase the risk that you come down with one of those major killers. Eventually, this results in a loss of health span and death. So what we can do to avoid that, what we can do to maximize our health span and really age appropriately, we can focus on what Restore calls hyper wellness. That includes hydration, oxygen, inner balance, which is just micronutrients and macronutrients, adopting a proper diet, using cold to boost our mood and our energy and relieve joint pain and also promote restful sleep, using saunas and heat therapy to relieve muscle and joint pain, detox your body, and improve cardiovascular function, getting the proper dosing of light so that you're getting appropriate sleep, you're getting appropriate focus, and also resting. You know, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about appropriate sleep. You know, like everyone likes to go, go, go. What can I do? What can I do more? It's equally important to ask yourself, what can I not do? When should I rest? If we're not resting, we're not making gains on anything that we're putting in through our hyper wellness focus. And then of course, you need to move, you need to make your bones and muscles stronger and so you're more active. And then all of this should not be done in isolation, right? We need a community behind us if we're going to live a true healthy life. Having a community has been shown to mitigate all risk of chronic diseases and stressors. And so this is what Restore likes to call the building blocks of hyper wellness. And I need to define hyper wellness real quick, and I've thrown the term out a couple of times, but let's take a step back and actually talk about what it means. So hyper wellness is a proactive approach to strengthening your body's defense system against stressors. It reduces our long-term health risks, and it potentially extends our health span, right? If we focus on hyper wellness, we improve our health span and we avoid the risk of those chronic diseases. So we modified the previous infographic to show that if we focus on hyper wellness, we're still born healthy and well, we age, we accumulate inflammation, our health span's at risk. But then that's where it comes in with us focusing on hyper wellness. You know, we're getting the appropriate cold, the appropriate heat, the appropriate micro and macronutrients. We have our community, we're moving. That brings us back to a relatively healthy and well lifestyle. And so that just basically feeds a cycle, right? Whenever we're at risk of health span, because we're adopting the hyper wellness lifestyle and focusing on health span, we're not really being moved towards a high likelihood of disease. All of this is done so you can feel better and do more of what you love to do. So I'd like to talk about what Restore's vision is to extend our health spans so we can do more of what we love to do for longer. That's different for everyone, right? We have people that come in and are professional athletes. They need to perform better. We also have people that come in and they want to reduce their joint pain or they want to take walks around the lake with their family. Doing more is subjective, but the strategies that allow you to do more are not subjective, right? Everyone needs community. Everyone needs appropriate micro and macronutrients, and everyone needs the proper dosing of light, cold, heat, etc., so that they can make their health span and lifespan equal. So I'd like to close the presentation by going back to our earlier question, but changing it up a little bit. What can you do right now to get those 10 more good years that you want? Maybe the community aspect is missing in your life. Maybe you can adopt some heat therapy and use saunas. Maybe you could take cold showers, use cryotherapy. Maybe we need to focus on your diet. That part is different. The building blocks stay the same as well as the principles. And by focusing on health span earlier, we're able to avoid our risk of chronic diseases for longer. We're going to move into a quick panel so we can hear from some experts, talk about what they do and what their strategies are for health span. And this panel is going to be moderated by our CMO, David Fosses. Thank you.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to Restore South by Southwest virtual panel on treating the aging disease. I'm Restore's Chief Marketing Officer, David Fosses, and I have a great group of panelists here, and we're going to have a nice in-depth conversation around the idea of health span and lifespan. So by way of introduction, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, and why don't we start with you, Sarah?
Hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Cohen. I am the owner of Conscious Chiropractic, and I am a network spinal chiropractor.
Thanks. Eric?
Hi guys, my name is Eric Hinman. I'm an endurance athlete. I've competed in 5 Ironmans, 20 plus half Ironmans, the Leadville mountain bike race, sponsored athlete, entrepreneur, and huge proponent of health and wellness and doing it for longevity.
All right, thanks, Eric. How about you, Doc?
Hi, my name's Kirk Parsley. I'm a former Navy SEAL. I got out of the SEAL teams, went to medical school, went back to the SEAL teams as their physician. Learned a lot about health optimization there. They didn't have disease. They were just guys who wanted to perform better. So took a very different educational path than my regular Western medical degree. And that led me into sort of the health and wellness and the functional integrative medicine kind of pathway, which I do now, as well as have a supplement company.
Fantastic. And William, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, David. My name is William Watts. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm the director of Restore Labs. Restore Labs focuses on innovation and product and process updates for Restore as a whole.
Thanks for the introductions. So as you can see, we've got a great group of panelists here from a range of backgrounds, and we really want to give you a well-rounded understanding of health span and how to extend that health span and really get yourself living a more health and wellness lifestyle. Just to get things started, if you didn't have a chance to see the presentation that preceded the panel, just to give you a quick definition of what we talk about when we talk about health span. So if you think about lifespan, which is what we typically talk about, that is the length of your life from the moment you're born to the moment you die. Health span, on the other hand, is what we think about the number of years that you live disease-free and relatively mobile and productive as a human. And what the data tells us is that lifespans, the average lifespan in America is 79 years, but the average health span in America is actually only 63 years. So you actually end up having about 16 years towards the end of your life where you might be developing disease, where you're less mobile, less productive, less able to do the things that you love in life. And so what the science has been teaching us over the last couple of decades is really that we now have a better understanding of aging and how we might be able to slow the process down so that you have a longer health span. So that's kind of the definition of health span, to just give you a little bit of context. And now we're going to kind of dive right in with some questions. So to get started, Eric, maybe you can kick us off. Can you describe some of the habits and interventions that you've personally adopted or changed to help you age in a healthy way?
Sure. So my romance with health span dates back about 12 years now, when I first started competing in triathlons. And, you know, I realized during that time period that, you know, all of the movement that it takes to be a competitive Ironman athlete it was just making me feel incredible. I didn't have a low in the middle of the day. I never felt tired anymore. I was just, constantly exuding positive energy and had unlimited energy. And over about a 5 or 6 year period, each year I would pick something new to tackle. So, one year was deep sleep, one year was recovery, one year was purposeful training, one year was nutrition. And, after each of those years, it would then be put on autopilot and be part of my lifestyle. The last 3 to 4 years have really been spent focusing on recovery. I'm 40 years old now. I still train 2 to 3 hours a day. And the only way I'm able to put in that type of volume and feel good day in and day out is by really focusing on different recovery modalities. And some of those include, on pretty much a daily basis, I do some type of cold exposure. So I'm either sitting in a cold stream for 3 to 10 minutes, depending on the temperature. I'm doing an ice bath. I have an ice barrel at home in my loft in Denver. Or I'm visiting Restore and doing cryotherapy and sitting in the infrared sauna. And by doing those 2 different things, cold exposure and heat exposure, I have just noticed a tremendous difference in how I feel day in and day out, my ability to train hard day in and day out. And, obviously movement is a huge function of health span. And all of these are a snowball effect. If you're moving often, you're going to sleep better, you're going to want to eat well. And, all of these things combined really add years on to being able to do this for a long, long time to come.
That's great. Thank you. Sarah, maybe you can follow up with that. I know you, in addition to your own kind of medical practice, you're kind of a biohacker yourself. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your habits.
Yeah, so I'm actually from a unique background where my dad is a chiropractor. I come from a family of chiropractors. So I implemented a lot of healthy practices at a very young age. And really, chiropractic is all about having no interference in your nervous system, because your nervous system is what is controlling all of your major functions in your body. We experience reality through our nervous system. So for me, that's my number one thing, of having a clear nervous system. And really, I got into network spinal care. That's all about your energy, keeping your energy up, making sure your energy rich. In addition to that, I've been practicing yoga since I was 17 years old. Yoga, breath work, meditation, drinking enough water. All of these are really simple life hacks to keep our blueprint up.
Fantastic. And then, Bill, since you're kind of within Restore, Eric talked a little bit about ice baths and cryotherapy and sauna. Can you just tell us the audience a little bit about those modalities?
Yeah, well, we use whole body cryotherapy chambers, which exposes your body to negative 180 degrees below zero. And that causes a significant shock in your body, basically kicks off the fight or flight response. That forces your body to release norepinephrine, which immediately helps with some pain and inflammation. It also improves your energy levels. So it's actually a great way to not only deal with aches and pains, but also improve your mood and just make you feel better on the day. Saunas have been shown to improve cardiovascular function, help you detox, and they just make you feel good. I think like a lot of times people are like, what specific metric do we use to track this specific thing? But it's equally important to say, like, are you feeling good and did you enjoy this experience? And both of those provide pleasurable experiences. I myself use a lot of hyperbaric oxygen therapy at Restore, but without getting too in the weeds on hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I'd probably pass it over to Kirk, because he's done a lot of research on hyperbaric oxygen therapy and what it's actually doing to your body on a cellular level.
Sounds good. And I will just make a note, because I know that the idea of going in negative 180 degrees Fahrenheit sounds scary, but if you've ever been in a cold shower, a cold pool, or an ice bath, I actually find it to be less shocking to go into the cryo chamber, but you still get a lot of the great benefits. And so, I think one of the points that I would want to make throughout this conversation is you can certainly go to a Restore to get these modalities, but there's a lot of things that you can do at home, whether that's a cold shower or, an ice bath, or a dip in a really nice cold pool. So Kirk, I'll hand it over to you. William kind of laid it up there for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so I actually did my residency in the Navy in dive medicine, which is hyperbarics medicine, because obviously that's where it all came from, because divers get diving injuries and you recompress them in chambers. Hyperbarics has a lot, and there's a lot of positive benefits to it. There are a lot of ailments that can be improved with hyperbarics. However, in the US, there's only 13 approved, FDA approved uses for it. And places like Russia, there's like 300, Israel's like 160. There's a few known mechanisms of action. When you go deep enough, you have high enough oxygen content, you can actually crush oxygen down into the bloodstream without being attached to the red blood cells. The red blood cells, as most people know, have something called hemoglobin on it. Hemoglobin attaches oxygen. As it floats around in your bloodstream, the oxygen can strip off, leave the blood vessels, and go into surrounding tissues. But once you've saturated your hemoglobin, you can't put any more oxygen in your body. You can put all the oxygen you want in your lungs, it's not going to get into your bloodstream. But when you're under hyperbarics, you can actually crush those. There's essentially like air bubbles of oxygen down into the blood. They can free float in the serum, and then they can leave and they can get into the interstitium. So they can get into areas around cells that don't actually have blood vessels, that have poor blood supply. Things that are, and there's lots of regions of your body that are that way. Your brain's one of the biggest regions of or most important regions of your body that's that way. And that oxygenation, I mean, the vast majority of all the energy produced in our body, used in our body, is oxidative phosphorylation. So you need oxygen to do that. So by doing that, you actually increase the amount of oxygen available to the mitochondria. And over time, because there's an excess of oxygen, you'll actually increase the mitochondrial density, the number of mitochondria in each cell. So that's a couple of the mechanisms there in which hyperbarics helps, but there are probably half a dozen mechanisms, but those are sort of the two major ones.
Yeah. And we've found that it has incredible healing properties. And just to kind of reiterate some of the points that you made, obviously we breathe in oxygen through our lungs, and then our blood is meant to transport that oxygen throughout the body to help produce energy throughout the body and in the cells. And hyperbarics basically helps to support and supplement that, and help to get the oxygen into the areas of your body where it's harder to get to. And it has excellent excellent qualities for cognitive healing and things like that. So Kirk, just to kind of continue with you, what do you think people over or under emphasize or estimate when it comes to improving their health and aging?
Well, probably not going to be a big surprise to anyone on here. I think sleep is completely underutilized. It's the most performance enhancing behavior you can do. If you think about it, you're born into this contract. Every human is, every mammal on this planet, almost all life as we know it, does something that we would recognize as sleep. But if you think about it, you're born into this contract, basically, that you need 8 hours of sleep to recover from 16 hours of being awake. Now, the harder those 16 hours are, the better the quality of that 8 hours needs to be. And sometimes it needs to be longer than that. So like Eric, for example, if he's training for long, he's doing Ironman triathlons, his volume of training probably going to require more than 8 hours of sleep. He might require 9 or 10 hours of sleep. But it's important to realize what's going on in those hours. Those aren't hours in which you're just sort of loosely laying around and not doing much. Like, those are actually the hours you're getting better. That's when you're recovering. That's when you're getting stronger. That's when you're getting smarter. That's when you're converting things from working memory into long-term memory. That's when your muscles are actually getting stronger or more enduring. You're actually damaging your muscles while you're exercising. So when you go to bed at night, your brain and body essentially use today as the template to figure out what your brain and body need to repair to be able to get up tomorrow and do the same thing you did today, but maybe a little bit better. And when we're younger, that's possible. Like you see kids go to bed and you say, okay, they go to bed at 100% capacity. They wake up at 101% capacity. You actually see them get better from day to day or week to week. And kids, of course, sleeping longer. As we become adults, there's a watershed point. It's probably somewhere between 35 and 55 years old, depending on your genetics and how you've lived your life and lots of other things, which it's no longer really possible for you to recover 100%. So you don't go to bed at 100% and wake up at 100%. That's your goal. And if you do that, then you sort of remain constant. You gain a little bit of skills, maybe a little endurance, a little bit of muscle strength, whatever, but your capability stays the same. As we get older, what does it really mean to get older? What it really means is that we're not recovering. So I'm going to bed tonight and I'm waking up 99.9% tomorrow, instead of waking up 100%. And then the next day is the same thing. And the next day is the same thing. And then you add up that 0.1% loss. You add that up over the course of years, and that's what we call aging. If I could recover 100% every day, if every injury could recover, if every bit of sun damage could recover, if any damage I've done to my tendons, ligaments, bones, tissues, whatever, if all of that could recover every day, I would not age. I would be exactly the same every day, right? So really, when you think about health span, your health span is your ability to do what you want to do, and you're using what you do as the template for what you're going to be able to do. So if you want to be able to maintain your current capacity, you need to be able to recover from what you're currently doing and what you value, and that almost 100% of all the recovery happens during sleep.
Yeah, thank you. I wish I had met you when I was younger, because I think one of the things that I definitely did not pay attention to was my sleep.
I wish I would have met me when I was younger. I mean, I slept like 5 hours a night for probably 20 years. So yeah.
That's right. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've done. That and diet have been the things that I've really focused on over the last couple of years to really start to change my habits for better recovery and to kind of slow down the process for me. But I don't know, Sarah or Eric, do you have anything to add there as far as things that people might over or kind of underemphasize related to aging and their health?
I definitely think the focused recovery aspect is something that people are underestimating. With the rise of boutique fitness and HIIT workouts and CrossFit, a lot of these just preach pounding yourself into the ground, which that's all fine and good. But if you're doing stuff like that, if you're running often, you're really damaging your tendons, ligaments, and muscles, and you need to have a focused recovery plan. And, that's why I really do preach doing these cold exposure, the heat, figuring out something that fits in with your lifestyle that is feasible and accessible to you. That's, the most important thing. And then again, just building that into your lifestyle.
All right. Sounds good. Well, William, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Can you talk to us a bit about the latest scientific research and advancements related to health span? Obviously, there's been a lot of breakthroughs over the last couple of decades, but it'd be great if you could kind of dive into some of that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the idea that we can measure and then manage and prevent the aging process is a major win, right? Like if you would have told my grandparents that you can wear a watch that tells you how you're recovering, or get a blood or saliva test that tells you how your body should be performing, they would probably like call the police or the mental institution on me and try to get me sent away. But so that in and of itself is a major win. We understand that we can measure the effects that come with aging and then potentially manage and prevent them. And when I hear the term lifespan, I think of research and ideas that are being championed by people like Aubrey de Grey or David Sinclair, people that are looking for solutions and technology that are going to rejuvenate tissue like after the fact or extend maximal lifespan. So probably the most well-known drug coming out of those camps is metformin. I think the interesting thing about metformin is it actually appears to mimic what happens when we practice calorie restriction. So when I hear that, I think, well, we could just focus on calorie restriction earlier in life and then potentially not need to take drugs like that. But either way, we should never think that a solution coming from life extension is going to replace a solution coming from proactive health span and that focus. I think if we really want to live as long as we can and feel as good as we can during that time, we need to mirror or mimic all solutions and bring them together and kind of like stack everything on top of each other. It's kind of like Kirk talked about after getting a degree studying Western medicine, then he moved into a more integrative path. Now his merging of those two disciplines has made him overwhelmingly successful. You know, you can't be too far on one end or too far on the other end. But I think the most interesting research and most compelling research being done right now is on looking for solutions for what we call senescent cells. So senescent cells are basically cells that are no longer functioning correctly, and they hang around and they actually drive this process of senescence where they create other cells nearby that are no longer functioning correctly. Our immune system is supposed to clear them naturally, but as we get older, our immune system functions not as it did when we were young. And so we actually clear less and less senescent cells. Over time, this leads to chronic inflammation, drives the aging process, and can potentially increase a risk of age-related diseases. So I think that's probably the most compelling research being done right now. Like, how do we stop senescent cells?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna kind of unpack a couple other things or provide a little bit more context on a couple of things you talked about. So metformin, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's typically a medication that is prescribed to older individuals, I think for cholesterol, either cholesterol or diabetes. But one of the things that they these aging researchers discovered was that it actually has a similar effect on the body as something like intermittent fasting, or what William was talking about as caloric restriction. And that is one of the things that we have found is that caloric restriction without deficiency in the nutrients that you need for your body to optimally function is actually one of the things that can potentially help to extend your health span. And so it kind of plays off of the previous question as well, as far as things that people over or underemphasize. I think one of the things that people overemphasize is any particular, one solution as the silver bullet. It's not just about intermittent fasting. It's not just about getting more sleep. But as William was talking about, when you start to pack these things on top of each other and use them in a complementary way, you start to get some really good dividends on just the way you feel in general, better energy, but also potentially slowing down that process of aging.
Yeah, and I think that is actually what is so exciting about being on the Restore team, is that we're on the forefront of working with people that are coming with more traditional backgrounds, like the doctors and high science and all that. But then also we get to bring in proactive wellness solutions and merge them to create like this weird blended but really effective life touch medical solution where we have medical directors, registered nurses, we have complete medical oversight, but then we also make it as accessible as possible. It's just a really exciting time to be involved in the health and wellness space, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. So Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you and just tell us a little bit, how would you compare maybe the traditional approach to healthcare, or sometimes what we now call sick care, versus a proactive kind of wellness lifestyle and preventative care?
Yeah, I think that the big difference is what your outcome is. I think the traditional method, their goal is to help you not die. So they're going to help you not die however they can, put you on a medication, whatever kind of treatment plan, just to help keep you alive. And I think the proactive wellness side of things is to take what you already have and not only maintain it, but amplify it for as long as possible, because really there are no limits. There is so much potential out there. And I think that group of individuals is like, okay, I've reached this potential. Now what can I reach? Now what can I reach? I think that's the big thing about it.
Yeah. And one of the things that we kind of had an aside about earlier was, as it's as important, the nutrition and the things you put in your body as it is how you treat yourself on the outside. Anything from, eczema to getting facials and things like that. But actually, the better nutrients, the better you take care of yourself on the inside, it actually starts to show on the outside. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about that and kind of how you approach it in your day-to-day life.
Totally. Yeah. Again, like it's simple things like having enough water, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep. Also, too, I think it comes down to quality of life. William touched on this, but really, I think it comes down to like, how are you experiencing your life? Like, are you experiencing love? Are you experiencing passion? Are you experiencing joy? Are you experiencing purpose? You know, these things show, and really we shine from the inside out.
Yeah, I love that. All right, cool. So Eric, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Where do you see the health and wellness industry going? You mentioned you just got back from doing some research. It'd be great to hear some of the new upcoming things that you think we're going to be seeing from the health and wellness industry.
Sure. So I think the big one is personalization for optimization. And a few examples would be, I wear a Whoop, and there's a number of these different trackers out there. And based on my strain score, which is how Whoop tracks exertion throughout the day based on your heart rate, at night, it always tells me how much sleep I need to get so that I can recover to be able to perform again the next day. And then you have a recovery score the next day, which is based off of how much sleep you got, your heart rate variability when you wake up in the morning. And, these things are providing data to help optimize people to, again, give them a longer health span. Another example, and this is kind of on the athlete front, but I think it's going to, trickle down to anyone, is let's say I go for an hour mountain bike ride, or I do an hour CrossFit workout. I have my Hyperice app linked up with Strava and Garmin, and it'll recommend a 5-minute leg recovery flush based on that activity that I did. And I think that's going to be more commonplace where, based on the way you're living your life, there's going to be different things that recommend, here's what you should do so that you can get deep sleep and you can get as close as possible back to that 100% again tomorrow. And, it's not just for athletes. This is really for optimization. And I think every human out there wants to be optimized and they want to live a long, healthy life.
Yeah, I would agree. I've become, so you've got the Whoop band, I do the Aura Ring, but very similar on the metrics, and I've become very reliant on the my sleep metrics. And one of the things that I've found is I might see a spike in my and it might not even be that big of a spike, but some change, upward trajectory on my my resting heart rate at night, or my respiratory rate, or it might be some dip in my heart rate variability. And what I found is that's oftentimes an early indication that I might, something might be going on in my body, and I won't feel it until 2 days later, but then all of a sudden, scratchy throat or something like that. So It's been interesting to see how these metrics, as you start to pay attention to them and understand kind of what your baseline and benchmark are, if you see fluctuations, you're either kind of on the path to optimizing, or there actually might be something going on in your body that you need to pay attention to and help correct. So anyone else want to kind of add on to that? What are some of the things that we think we'll see from the health and wellness industry coming up?
I think Eric hit the nail on the head with having that data flow between programs. Like eventually we're going to get to a place where your blood test provider talks to your wearable, which talks to your gym, which talks to whatever else you have in your life to treat your health and wellness. And like, I know I have done I'm pulling data from different wearables into spreadsheets on top of like workouts. And it is so tedious, and I work in it. So if I see value in it, I don't want to do it. I can't imagine why other people would want to take the steps to do that and create a holistic picture. But I think that software is coming. I know there's versions of that software like Heads Up Health that allow you to plug in what you want, but eventually it's all going to be an automated data flow, and it's going to be really easy for all customers.
Yeah. All right. And then kind of final question here, I'll hand it over to Kirk, but what do you see as a fad that is happening in the health and wellness space that maybe it will go away in the near term?
Well, what I think will go away and what I'd like to see go away are maybe two different things. But I'll answer both. I think what'll go away is what's been driven a lot by, the pandemic, is a lot of the isolation workouts. I think things like the Peloton are going to, go away because we're a social animal. And, the reason things like CrossFit are successful, and the reason guys like Eric go out and run, 6 and 8 hour races, is because we're a social animal and we want to be around other people and the energy of all that. So I think kind of a lot of this home workout isolation, stuff is obvious. But the fad I'd like to see go is just the fad of fads, right? The health, we are learning, we are getting more educated about what we think makes people healthier, but keep in mind, this is all observational, right? So we can, we're learning about heart rate variability and how that's applicable to performance and sleep, and, what that means about our autonomic nervous system. And people are tracking their sleep, and people are tracking their calories, and we're doing caloric restriction, we're doing cold baths, we're doing saunas. But if you think about it, we evolved to be on this planet. Just like every other form of life evolved to be on this planet and to be optimized for being on this planet. Well, what did that involve? It involved sometimes you didn't get to eat because there wasn't any food available. Sometimes it was really cold outside. Sometimes it was really hot outside. You were always active. You always had to move. You had to go get your food. You had to go dig up your food. You had to go hunt your food. And you went to sleep when the sun went down because there was nothing else to do. You couldn't see. We're very visual. We're a very visual animal. We can't see well at night. We can't do much at night. And so we would go, hide in our caves or our shelters once we could build those. And so we evolved a certain way on this planet. And what we're doing now, when you think about it, sitting, the cold bath is like, living through a winter. The fasting is like a mini famine. The saunas are like being out in the summer, right? These are things that we evolved to do. And so there's health benefit to them, but what are exactly the health benefits to them? Like, what's the ideal? We actually don't know. It may be true that if you're starving half of your life, you live longer. It might be true that if you're starving 10% of your life, you live longer. There's a quality of life payoff. And as William is saying, there's a lot of software coming out to help us make sense of this data. But right now, it's really important to realize that all of this is observational. We're just now getting like some hint of what all of this stuff means. So we're trying to track it, but right now we're just collecting data. We're collecting data, and we're not going to know until our kids are old. Like then we're going to have a better idea, but we got to start collecting the data right now. So, that's what I would like to see go away is the fad of, the smokestacks, right? Everybody being really isolated and saying, well, fasting's the answer. Well, exercise is the answer. Well, it's nutrition is the answer. It's like, it's all the answer. How did we evolve? What was life like for the first 100,000 years this body existed? Let's do that. And then we'll measure what we can of that and figure out how to do that better.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, I would second that by saying, I think it can also sometimes be intimidating. Obviously, we're talking about this big concept of health span, and people get overwhelmed with their day-to-day life, their routine. If you're a parent having to, juggle kids and work and things like that. And the advice that I would give to people is, to not look for that silver bullet, but to actually do some of these things that are complementary and try to find what you can actually fit into your day-to-day routine. And that just might be, you do 5 minutes of stretching and movement in the morning before you get in the shower, finish off the shower with turning it all the way cold. And, if you're going to eat in the morning, just eat fruit and stuff that's easy to digest. And already there, you'll probably find that you're having more energy kind of throughout the day. And so start to kind of build on those habits and recognize what makes you feel good, what makes you feel better and kind of more optimized and ready to tackle the day. But I would absolutely second that. I think it's not one solution. It's obviously, many things that go into this. So I think we are kind of running out of time. I'll open it up. Any closing remarks from any of the panelists? Any wisdom you want to leave us with?
I think too, the best wisdom is that, you know, we are intelligent beings. Like, we know what's good for us from the inside out. And so with, you know, there being an overwhelming amount of things that we can do, just tuning in and listening to our body of like, wow, this feels really good. Wow, when I do this for too long, it doesn't feel good anymore, you know, and just honoring that.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a great way to close it out. Well, I want to thank our panelists for joining us. Thank you for the conversation, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
good time.